no question cuts deeper. Where does power come from? Not the power of kings or armies, not the power of wealth or position, the real power. The kind that existed before the first star was born. The kind that will remain after the last star dies. The kind that cannot be given or taken, only recognized. Every ancient civilization tried to answer this question. The Greeks gave power to Zeus. The Norse gave it to Odin. The Egyptians gave it to Ra. They looked up at the sky, at thunder and lightning and the burning sun, and they said, "That is where power lives." But one civilization looked somewhere else entirely. They looked inward, and what they found was not a king on a throne, not a warrior with a sword, not a father figure in the clouds. What they found was a woman, not a woman in the human sense, though she takes human form when she chooses. Not a woman defined by any relationship, though she is mother, wife, daughter, and lover all at once. What they found was a force so fundamental, so vast, so alive, that calling it feminine was not a limitation. It was the highest truth they knew. The ancient seers of India called this force Shakti, and they said, with complete certainty, after lifetimes of meditation and thousands of years of inquiry, that Shakti is not a goddess among gods. Shakti is the energy that makes gods possible. Without her, Brahma cannot create. Without her, Vishnu cannot sustain. Without her, Shiva is not a destroyer. He is not even a meditator. Without Shakti, Shiva is Shava, a corpse. This is not a metaphor. This is the central cosmological statement of an entire civilization, and it changes everything about how we understand Hinduism and how we understand the world. This is the story of 10 goddesses who did not merely appear in Hinduism. They are Hinduism. They are its beginning, its structure, its living heartbeat, and its final destination. This is their story, and in a way, it has always been yours. Long before we can speak of any individual goddess, we must sit in a darkness that precedes everything. Not the darkness of night, which is only the absence of light. The darkness before light itself was born. The silence before the first vibration. The stillness before the first breath of the cosmos. Ancient Hindu cosmology does not begin with a god speaking the world into existence. It does not begin with a divine act of will or a cosmic decree. It begins with something far more mysterious, far more intimate, and far more difficult to understand with the rational mind. It begins with Adi Shakti. Adi means first, primordial, before all others. Shakti means power, energy, the capacity to act, to create, to move. But even these translations miss something essential. Because in Sanskrit, Shakti is not merely a noun describing something that exists. It is closer to a verb, an ongoing process of becoming, of pulsing, of living. To say Adi Shakti is to say the first aliveness. The Devi Bhagavata Purana, one of the most sacred texts in the Shakta tradition of Hinduism, describes what existed before creation with language that borders on poetry and philosophy simultaneously. It speaks of a state beyond time, beyond space, beyond the categories of existence and non-existence. In that state, there is no Brahma, no Vishnu, no Shiva. There are no worlds, no stars, no living beings. There is no karma, no dharma, no maya. There is only Adi Shakti, resting in herself. The texts describe her as nirguna, without qualities, without form, without limitation. She is pure consciousness that has not yet decided to become anything. She is potential so absolute that even infinity could not contain all she is capable of. And then, in a moment that the texts can describe but never fully explain, she moves. Not physically, not like a person standing up from a chair. Her movement is more subtle than that and more total. It is the movement of consciousness toward expression, of silence toward sound, of the infinite toward the finite. It is the primal yes, the moment pure being decides to become existence. From that movement, everything follows. The first thing to emerge from Adi Shakti's self-expression is not matter or energy in any physical sense. It is consciousness with direction. The capacity to know, the capacity to act, the capacity to love. These three become the seeds of Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, the great trinity that most people think of as the primary forces of Hindu cosmology. But notice what this means. The trinity does not produce Shakti. Shakti produces the trinity. This is perhaps the most radical statement in all of Hindu philosophy, and it is one that gets lost when people approach Hinduism, only through its most surface-level stories. People see Saraswati and call her Brahma's wife. They see Lakshmi and call her Vishnu's consort. They see Parvati and call her Shiva's beloved. And in one sense, all of this is true, but in a deeper sense, it reverses the actual relationship. The goddess is not secondary to the god. She is his source, his power, his very capacity to be divine. Without Saraswati, Brahma has no creative intelligence. Without Lakshmi, Vishnu has no preserving grace. Without Parvati, without Shakti, Shiva is, as the texts say plainly, a corpse. The marriage of god and goddess in Hinduism is not a social arrangement. It is a cosmological statement. It says, consciousness and energy are inseparable. Awareness without power cannot act. Power without awareness cannot create. The universe exists in the sacred marriage of these two, and the female principle is not the lesser half. She is the half that makes the other half alive. Adi Shakti herself, in her primordial form, is rarely depicted with a fixed face or a specific iconography. She is described as light beyond light, as the darkness that contains all potential, as the sound from which all mantras are born, as the ground from which all existence grows. She is Mahamaya, the great illusion, not in the sense of being false, but in the sense of being the creative power that makes the infinite appear finite, the formless appear formed, the one appear as many. This is her first gift to existence, the world itself, and from this vast, formless, primordial source, three rivers of divine power begin to flow. Each river takes a form, each form takes a name, each name becomes a goddess, and each goddess shapes a dimension of reality so fundamental that without her, that dimension simply ceases to function. The first river flows toward knowledge, toward language, toward the ordering of chaos into meaning. It becomes Saraswati. The second river flows toward abundance, toward grace, toward the sustaining warmth that keeps life choosing itself over death. It becomes Lakshmi. The third river flows toward transformation, toward the dissolution of what is finished, toward the fierce love that refuses to let the universe stagnate. It becomes Kali, or, in her more accessible form, Durga. These three are called the Tridevi, the three goddesses who correspond to the three cosmic functions of creation, preservation, and dissolution. They are not separate beings who happen to share similar portfolios. They are three faces of one reality. The way white light becomes red, blue, and yellow when it passes through a prism, and the reality they are three faces is Adi Shakti herself. Let us turn now to Saraswati. Because in a very real sense, before anything else in Hinduism could be spoken, written, or transmitted, Saraswati had to exist. She is the goddess of knowledge, of language, of music, of the arts, of wisdom, and of the sacred sciences. She is depicted in white. White sari, white skin, seated on a white lotus, or sometimes on a white swan. She holds a veena, the ancient stringed instrument, in two of her four hands. In another hand she holds a book, the Vedas, the most sacred scriptures of Hinduism. In the fourth hand she holds a string of prayer beads representing spiritual discipline. Every element of her iconography is a philosophical statement. White is the color that contains all other colors. To be dressed in white is to be the source from which all differentiation emerges. The lotus she sits on rises from muddy water, but remains unstained. Saraswati's wisdom arises from the material world but is not corrupted by it. The swan is considered in Hindu tradition to have a remarkable quality. When offered a mixture of milk and water, a swan can separate the two and drink only the milk. This is called viveka, discernment. The capacity to separate truth from illusion, substance from noise, wisdom from information. Saraswati does not just represent knowledge. She represents the right kind of knowledge, held in the right way for the right purpose. Her role in Hindu history is almost impossible to overstate. She's credited, in the mythological sense that goes beyond literal biography, with the gift of Sanskrit itself. And this matters more than it might initially appear. Sanskrit is not simply a language. Every scholar who has studied it, from ancient Indian grammarians to modern linguists, has noted its extraordinary precision, its almost mathematical structure, its capacity to contain layers of meaning in a single word that would require paragraphs in other languages. The ancient Indians believed that Sanskrit was not invented, but revealed, that it was the language in which consciousness itself thinks, and that Saraswati was the one who gave humanity access to it. From Sanskrit came the Vedas, the oldest religious texts in continuous use anywhere on Earth. The Rig Veda contains hymns that scholars date to approximately 1500 BCE or earlier, making them older than the Hebrew Bible, older than the Homeric epics, older than virtually everything that survives from the ancient world. These hymns were preserved not in writing initially, but in memory, passed from teacher to student across hundreds of generations, with a precision that modern scholars find extraordinary. The preservation of the Vedas is itself a kind of miracle, and Hindu tradition attributes that preservation to the grace of Saraswati. From the Vedas came the Upanishads, the philosophical texts that contain some of the most sophisticated thinking about consciousness, reality, identity, and liberation ever produced by human minds. The question, "Who am I?" is pursued in the Upanishads with a depth and rigor that modern philosophy is still working to match. From the Upanishads came the 6 schools of Hindu philosophy: Nyaya, Vaisheshika, Samkhya, Yoga, Mimamsa, and Vedanta, each a complete intellectual tradition with its own logic, metaphysics, and practice. All of this, every word, every verse, every philosophical argument, every devotional poem, lives under the blessing of Saraswati. But she is not only for the learned. Every child in India, even today, offers a prayer to Saraswati before an examination. Every musician, before performing, touches their instrument to their forehead and remembers her. Every writer, before putting words to paper, invokes her. She's the patron of students, of teachers, of artists, of scientists, of seekers of all kinds. Because Saraswati understands something that purely intellectual traditions sometimes forget. Wisdom is not just about accumulating information. It is about developing the inner instrument, the mind, the heart, the attention that can receive truth when it arrives. The veena she plays is not just a musical instrument. It is a metaphor for the human being, an instrument that produces beauty only when it is properly tuned, properly held, and played with both skill and love. She is also associated with rivers, and the ancient Saraswati River, mentioned repeatedly in the Rig Veda as one of the most sacred rivers in India, is named for her. Modern satellite imagery and geological research have actually confirmed the existence of a large ancient river in the region where the Vedic civilization flourished, a river that dried up thousands of years ago. The fact that an ancient civilization named their most sacred river after the goddess of knowledge tells us something profound about what they valued most. For the ancient Indians, knowledge was not just practical. It was not just about building better tools or winning wars. Knowledge was sacred. The act of learning was an act of devotion. The ability to speak clearly, to think precisely, to appreciate beauty, to understand the cosmos. These were not human achievements to be proud of. They were gifts from Saraswati to be received with humility. This is a worldview that changed everything about how Hinduism developed. It is why the tradition produced not just priests and warriors, but philosophers and mathematicians and musicians and poets. It is why a civilization that valued Saraswati could simultaneously produce the Vedas and the game of chess, algebra, and classical dance, grammar, and surgery. Knowledge in all its forms was considered divine, and its source was a woman in white, seated on a lotus, playing a stringed instrument at the edge of a sacred river. If Saraswati is the goddess who gives existence meaning through knowledge, then Lakshmi is the goddess who makes existence beautiful through grace. She is one of the most beloved figures in all of Hinduism, not because she represents power or wisdom or even love in the romantic sense, but because she represents something every living being needs and secretly fears losing: abundance. Not wealth in the narrow sense of money, though she is certainly the goddess of material prosperity. Abundance in the full sense. The feeling that life is generous, that the universe is not hostile, that there is enough, that you are enough, that grace is available to all who open themselves to it. Her iconography is immediately recognizable and immediately joyful. She's depicted in red, the color of life, of fire, of auspiciousness. She sits or stands on a fully open lotus, meaning she has not closed herself against the world, but opens completely to it. Gold coins pour from one of her hands, a constant, never-ending flow of abundance. Two of her hands hold lotuses, connecting her to purity and spiritual unfolding. She is flanked by elephants who pour water over her, the ancient Indian symbol of royal consecration, of being blessed by the highest powers. Everything about her image says, the universe wants to give. Her relationship with Vishnu, the great preserver of cosmic order, is one of the most celebrated divine romances in all of Hindu mythology. But it is important to understand this relationship correctly, because it is often reduced to a conventional depiction of a devoted wife following her husband. The reality is far more complex and far more interesting. Lakshmi is portrayed throughout the texts as a fundamentally free being. She does not simply belong to Vishnu, she chooses him again and again across cosmic ages. And crucially, her presence is not guaranteed. The texts describe multiple occasions where Lakshmi leaves, where she withdraws her grace because the one who should have been caring for the world has become careless or arrogant or inattentive. One of the most famous such stories involves the sage Durvasa, known throughout Hindu mythology for his extraordinary spiritual power and his equally extraordinary temper. Durvasa obtained a garland of flowers from a celestial nymph, flowers that had been blessed, flowers carrying the essence of divine grace. He offered this garland to Indra, the king of the gods. Indra, in a moment of casual arrogance, placed the garland on his elephant's trunk. The elephant tossed it to the ground. Durvasa was incensed. But more importantly, Lakshmi was insulted. She withdrew, and when Lakshmi left, the consequences were immediate and total. The gods, who had been sustaining the three worlds through their cosmic functions, began to lose their power. Crops failed, devotion declined. The entire cosmic order began to unravel because the grace that had been sustaining it was gone. This story is not merely mythology. It is a philosophical statement about the nature of prosperity and grace. Lakshmi cannot be hoarded. She cannot be taken for granted. She cannot be treated as a possession or a right. She is, by her very nature, a blessing that must be actively honored, or she moves on. The universe is abundant, but abundance is not unconditional. It flows toward consciousness that has cultivated the capacity to receive and the wisdom to be grateful. This is why Hindu tradition, even today, treats wealth with a reverence that confuses some modern observers. The business communities of India have historically maintained a practice of regular puja, worship, of their account books, their tools, their instruments of livelihood. Not because money is God, but because the grace that flows through material forms is sacred and must be honored as such. On the festival of Diwali, entire cities light up with lamps and fireworks and sweets, primarily in honor of Lakshmi, welcoming her into homes and hearts and businesses for the coming year. But perhaps the most profound dimension of Lakshmi's meaning goes deeper than prosperity or even grace. It points toward a truth about the nature of reality itself. In Hindu cosmology, Vishnu descends to earth in various forms, his avatars, whenever the cosmic order is threatened. He becomes Rama to defeat Ravana. He becomes Krishna to guide the Pandavas and speak the Bhagavad Gita. And every time he descends, Lakshmi descends with him. She becomes Sita when he is Rama. She becomes Rukmini, and some traditions say Radha, when he is Krishna. This pattern tells us something extraordinary. It says that wherever the divine descends into the world to restore order and beauty, grace always accompanies it. Vishnu without Lakshmi is power without love, order without joy, truth without beauty. The two must always come together. The universe is not just maintained by a cosmic principle of order. It is maintained by the love that makes order worth having. Lakshmi is that love made visible. Now we must speak of fire, because if Saraswati represents the luminous intelligence at the heart of Hinduism, and Lakshmi represents its overflowing grace, then Durga and Kali represent something that is harder for the comfortable mind to accept, but that the tradition insists is equally sacred. The truth that love, in its fullest form, is not soft, that the universe in its deepest wisdom is not gentle, that there is a kind of compassion that looks like wrath, a kind of grace that looks like destruction, a kind of mother that does not protect you from pain but destroys the very source of your suffering, roots and all, with her own hands. This is Durga. This is Kali. This is the goddess in her warrior form, and her story begins with a failure. The gods failed. This is a remarkable thing for a religious tradition to admit about its own divinities. But Hinduism, to its enduring credit, does not pretend that the forces of cosmic good are invincible. It tells stories in which the gods lose, in which evil is powerful enough to conquer heaven, in which the great trinity, Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva, is insufficient to the task before them. The story of Durga begins with a demon named Mahishasura. His name means buffalo demon, and he is depicted as being able to shift between human and buffalo form at will. What makes him extraordinary and extraordinarily dangerous is not just his physical power, which is immense, but his spiritual preparation. He has performed austerities so severe for so long with such total commitment that Brahma himself appeared before him and offered him a boon. Mahishasura asked for a very specific kind of immortality. He could not be killed by any god, any demon, any man, any divine weapon. He listed every category of being he could imagine, and that list, crucially, did not include women. Either through arrogance or oversight, he did not consider that a woman could be a threat. Armed with this boon, he took his armies to the heavens and waged war against the gods. The battle lasted 100 years, and then it was over. The gods were defeated, driven from their own realm, stripped of their positions, their powers diminished by Mahishasura's conquest. What followed was an act of divine collaboration, unlike anything else in Hindu mythology. The gods, all of them, including the Great Trinity, gathered together in a state of simultaneous fury and recognition. Their individual powers were insufficient. But what if those powers were not divided? What if every spark of divine energy in the cosmos was directed at a single point, a single form, a single purpose? From that gathering of divine fire, a light emerged, and from that light a form took shape. A woman, beautiful beyond description, terrible beyond comprehension. Her face carried the beauty of Shiva, the grace of Vishnu, the creative brilliance of Brahma. Her eyes carried the fire of Agni. Her arms carried the speed of Vayu, the wind. Her feet carried the solidity of the earth itself. The gods gave her their weapons. Shiva gave her his trident. Vishnu gave her his discus. Indra gave her his thunderbolt. Yama gave her his staff. Varuna gave her his noose. Every god contributed, and she took each weapon in a new pair of arms, until she had 18 arms, 18 weapons, 18 dimensions of divine power simultaneously available to her. She rode a lion, the king of animals, the symbol of royal courage, the one creature that does not flee from anything. And she smiled. This is Durga. Her very name means she who is difficult to approach, or she who removes difficulties. The name contains both the terror and the promise. She is difficult to face because she carries the full force of the cosmos. She removes difficulties because she is on your side. The battle that followed is described in the Devi Mahatmya, one of the most important texts in the Shakta tradition, believed to have been composed between the 4th and 7th centuries CE, though the traditions it encodes are far older. The Devi Mahatmya is not just a mythological narrative. It is a manual for understanding the nature of the divine feminine and how she operates in the cosmos and in the human psyche. Mahishasura sent his armies first. They were destroyed. He sent his generals, Chikshura, Chamara, Udagra, and others, each commanding tens of thousands of demon soldiers. They were destroyed. He shapeshifted between forms, from human to buffalo, from buffalo to lion, from lion to elephant, testing whether any of his transformations could resist her. None could. In his final form, the great buffalo demon fell to the goddess's trident. His blood poured out, and with it, the bondage of the 3 worlds was broken. But something happened during the battle that Durga herself did not fully control. As the fighting intensified, as demon blood was spilled and demon armies fell, a transformation began to occur within Durga herself. Her rage, the cosmic rage of a universe that had been wronged, the accumulated fury of all divine power directed at a single target, began to express itself in a new form. From Durga's forehead, from the space between her eyebrows where the third eye of higher consciousness is said to reside, a new being emerged, dark, absolutely dark, like the night sky that has no stars, wild hair like storm clouds, wearing nothing but a garland of skulls, eyes red with battle, tongue thrust out, dripping with demon blood, 3 eyes burning with a ferocious light. This was Kali. Her name comes from the Sanskrit word Kala, meaning time. She is time made visible. She is the force that nothing survives, the force before which every structure, every form, every ego eventually crumbles. She does not merely kill, she devours. She consumes what is finished, what is false, what is holding you back. The battle continued. Kali fought with a freedom and a ferocity that even Durga had not. She consumed demons whole. She drank their blood before it could touch the ground, because there was a demon named Raktabija who had been granted the boon that every drop of his blood that fell to earth would produce a new Raktabija, an army from blood, an infinite self-reproduction of evil. The other goddesses and gods could not fight Raktabija. Every wound made things worse. Every drop of blood multiplied the enemy. Kali could. She stretched out her tongue, that great, wide, all-consuming tongue, and drank. Every drop, every single drop of Raktabija's blood she consumed before it could touch the earth. She killed him again and again until there was nothing left of him but the original, and the original she devoured entirely. But then a new problem arose. Having consumed so much blood, having been saturated with the energy of cosmic combat, Kali could not stop. She danced, a terrible dance of destruction, and with each footstep, the earth trembled. Universes quaked. Even the gods who had called upon her were afraid. Only Shiva understood what was needed. He did not fight her. He did not order her to stop. He lay down on the ground, completely vulnerable, completely still, in her path. She stepped on him, and in that moment, recognition stopped her. She looked down and saw that she was standing on her own husband, her own other half. Her tongue came out. In the iconography, this is the universal gesture of oops, of sudden awareness, of the return of self-consciousness after a moment of total absorption. She stopped. This image, Kali standing on Shiva, tongue out, eyes wide, is one of the most powerful and most misunderstood images in all of Hinduism. To the uninitiated eye, it looks like domination, like a goddess defeating a god. But the tradition reads it differently. It reads it as a perfect metaphor for the relationship between consciousness and energy, between awareness and power. Shakti, energy, power, the active principle, rests upon Shiva, pure consciousness, awareness itself, the witness. Without Shiva beneath her, Kali has no ground. Without Kali on top of him, Shiva has no expression. The image is not about conflict, it is about completion. Kali herself has been, throughout Hindu history, the most misunderstood and the most liberating of all the goddesses. Colonial-era scholars looked at her iconography, skulls, blood, dark skin, wild hair, weapons, and saw only horror. They missed the fact that the skulls around her neck represent the Sanskrit alphabet. She carries the seed syllables of all language, all knowledge, all possible expression. They missed the fact that her darkness is not threatening but total, like the darkness of the infinite sky that holds all stars. They missed the fact that her devotees experienced in her presence not terror, but an extraordinary freedom, the freedom that comes from encountering a love so absolute that it has no need to pretend. Kali does not pretend. She shows you what is real. She does not spare you from the truth of impermanence, of death, of transformation. But her devotees say, and mystics like Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, who spent a lifetime in her presence, confirmed, that inside that terrible truth is an indescribable tenderness, that she who destroys is also she who liberates, that what she takes from you is only what was imprisoning you. The great Saint Ramakrishna used to say that Kali called him her son, that, in her presence, he experienced a love more complete than anything human love could offer, that her darkness was not the darkness of death, but the darkness of the womb, the place where transformation happens before the light is ready. This is the warrior face of the goddess. This is the love that will not let you remain comfortable in your smallness. This is the grace that burns. From the fire of Kali, we turn now to the mountains, to a young woman sitting alone in the snow, in the highest peaks of the Himalayas, in a posture of absolute stillness, surrounded by nothing but wind and stone and the distant thunder of avalanches. She has been sitting there for a very long time. Her name is Parvati. She is the daughter of the mountain, Himavan, king of the Himalayas, and his wife, Mena. She is not a warrior goddess. She does not have 18 arms or a lion to ride. She is, by all appearances, simply a young woman deeply in love with a god who does not seem to notice her. That god is Shiva. Shiva, in the period of Parvati's birth, had lost his first wife, Sati, who was, in the deepest theological sense, the same soul as Parvati, reborn with a new name and a new lineage. Sati had immolated herself in sacred fire after her father. Daksha had publicly disrespected Shiva, whom he considered an unworthy husband for his daughter. Unable to bear the humiliation of her husband being degraded, and unable to continue living in a body born of a father whose actions she could not defend, Sati had walked into the sacrificial fire. Shiva's grief at Sati's death had become something cosmic. He had picked up her body and wandered the universe with it, unable to set it down, unable to move forward into a universe without her. Other gods had watched, afraid of what Shiva's unhinged grief might do to the fabric of existence. Finally, Vishnu had used his discus to cut Sati's body into pieces, 51 pieces according to the texts, each of which fell to earth and became a sacred site, a Shakti Pitha, a seat of the goddess's power. Shiva had retreated then into the deepest meditation imaginable. Not the meditation of a peaceful yogi seeking inner calm, but the meditation of a being so shattered by loss that only the absolute stillness of pure consciousness could hold him together. He sat in the ashes of the dead, in the cremation grounds, in the coldest peaks of the mountains. He meditated on the nature of existence with an intensity that made the gods nervous. Because Shiva in meditation is the universe in suspension. His energy, his power, his creative and destructive force, all of it turned inward. Nothing moving outward, nothing creating, nothing dissolving, just the pure ferocious stillness of the absolute. And then came the problem. A demon named Tarakasura, armed with a boon similar to Mahishasura's, had been causing destruction throughout the cosmos. The gods had investigated how he could be defeated, and had found a terrible answer. Only a son of Shiva could kill Tarakasura. Only a being born of the union of Shiva's awakened energy with a worthy partner could generate the power needed. But Shiva was lost in grief, lost in meditation. The gods needed someone who could reach him, someone who could draw his consciousness back toward the world, back toward love, back toward the possibility of engagement. They turned to Parvati. She had been born with this purpose, though she was not aware of it yet. What she was aware of was simpler and more complete. She loved Shiva, not with the possessive, fearful love that seeks security, but with the total, unreserved love that seeks only the beloved's presence. She began her courtship in the most natural way. By going to where he was, she took up residence on the mountain where he meditated. She became his attendant, bringing flowers, clearing away leaves, making his space beautiful. Day after day she came. Day after day, Shiva did not acknowledge her. The gods, watching anxiously, made a mistake. They sent Kama, the god of desire, the Hindu equivalent of Eros, to shoot one of his flower arrows at Shiva, hoping to awaken his romantic interest in Parvati. Kama appeared, drew his bow, and released his arrow. Shiva's third eye opened, a beam of fire. Kama was incinerated, instantly, completely reduced to ash. The god of desire himself could not reach Shiva. This was a statement of extraordinary significance. Shiva could not be manipulated into love. There is a place on this earth where the ancient and the alive exist in the same. He could not be moved by desire, by beauty, by the same forces that move ordinary beings. If Parvati was to reach him, she would have to become something more than beautiful. She would have to become his equal. She understood this. What followed is one of the most striking stories in Hindu mythology, not because of any dramatic battles or cosmic events, but because of what it reveals about the nature of spiritual discipline and the nature of love. Parvati sent away her attendants. She removed her jewelry and her fine clothes. She took up residence alone in the mountains, not in a comfortable hermitage, but exposed to the elements. Sitting in the open air in the posture of meditation, she fasted. In summer, she sat surrounded by fires, adding heat to heat. In winter, she sat in icy water. In the monsoon, she sat in the open rain, without shelter. She performed tapas, austerities. The word comes from the Sanskrit root meaning heat or fire, and the tradition held that spiritual discipline generates a kind of internal fire that burns away impurity, burns away the limitations of the small self, and reveals the pure consciousness within. Parvati burned for years. The texts speak of thousands of years, though time in these stories is not literal but proportional. It is a way of saying as long as it took, she did it. Her austerities became so intense that they began to disturb the cosmos. The heat she was generating through her discipline was affecting the balance of the universe. Even Brahma took notice. He appeared before her and offered her a boon. She asked for one thing only: Shiva as her husband. Brahma went to Shiva, and Shiva, who had actually been watching Parvati's tapas, who had in fact been moved by a love he was not ready to express, agreed to the marriage. But before he did, he tested her. He appeared before her in disguise as a young Brahmin student and spent hours insulting Shiva, describing all his flaws, his bizarre behavior, his association with corpses and ash and wild animals and outcasts. He gave her every reason to abandon her pursuit. She didn't waver. She defended Shiva with perfect calm and perfect love. The disguise dissolved. Shiva stood before her in his full form. Their wedding is described in Hindu texts with a joy that is almost overwhelming. Every deity attended. The mountains themselves celebrated. The rivers danced. And in the marriage of Shiva and Parvati, the texts tell us, the cosmos was stabilized in a new and deeper way, because what had been divided was now whole. Consciousness and Shakti, awareness and power, the meditating absolute and the creative feminine force were joined again. Breath. From their union was born Kartikeya, the warrior son who defeated Tarakasura, as the gods had needed, and later Ganesha, the elephant-headed god who removes obstacles, who blesses beginnings, who sits at every threshold and every doorway in the Hindu world. But Parvati's significance is not only as mother and wife. Her real significance is as a model of the spiritual path. The story of her tapas is not a story about a woman pining for a man. It is a story about the soul's pursuit of the absolute. In Hindu philosophy, Shiva represents pure consciousness, the ultimate reality that underlies all appearances. The soul, represented by Parvati, must undertake its own tapas, its own burning, its own patient, fierce, committed practice to come into union with that consciousness. No desire can reach it. No manipulation can move it. Only genuine transformation, the kind that comes from sustained practice, can create the possibility of union. Parvati becomes, through this story, the patron of every seeker who has ever sat in meditation through difficulty, who has ever continued the practice when it seemed pointless, who has ever loved something too vast to be grasped, but too real to be abandoned. She is the love that does the work. There is a dimension of love in Hindu thought that goes beyond even the devoted, transformative love of Parvati. It is a love that cannot be institutionalized, cannot be formalized, cannot be fully explained in the language of duty or relationship or cosmic function. It is the love of Radha for Krishna. And it is considered, in the Bhakti tradition, that grew to become one of Hinduism's most influential spiritual movements, to be the highest expression of the human relationship with the divine. To understand why, we need to understand Krishna. Not the philosophical Krishna of the Bhagavad Gita, though that Krishna is also real and also essential, but the Krishna of Vrindavan, the young Krishna, the cowherd Krishna, the Krishna who grows up among the simple communities of the Yamuna River Valley, surrounded by cowherds and milkmaids, forests and riverbanks, and the smell of jasmine and the sound of flutes. This Krishna performs miracles, lifting the mountain Govardhana on his little finger to shelter his community from Indra's storms, dancing on the poisonous serpent Kaliya in the Yamuna, defeating demons sent to kill him throughout his childhood. He is clearly divine, but what makes the stories of this period so extraordinary and so endlessly beloved is that he is also completely human in his relationships, playful, mischievous, loving, present. Among all the gopis, the milkmaids who become devoted to him, there is one whose relationship with him transcends all others: Radha. She's older than him. She's sometimes described as already married to another man. She's not a queen or a princess. She has no special status, no special power, nothing that would mark her out as extraordinary to an outside observer. But she loves Krishna with a totality that the universe recognizes. The texts that explore Radha and Krishna, the Gita Govinda of the 12th century poet Jayadeva, the devotional poetry of Mirabai and Surdas, the Brahma Vaivarta Purana, all circle around the same astonishing claim: that Krishna, who holds the universe in his flute's melody, who is the source of all avatars, who speaks the most profound spiritual philosophy ever recorded, this Krishna is moved by Radha. This Krishna, in the language of devotional poetry, weeps when Radha is absent, longs for her, considers himself incomplete without her. In the theological interpretation of the Vaishnava tradition, particularly in the system developed by the 16th century Saint Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his successors, Radha is not a separate being from Krishna. She is his Hladini Shakti, his bliss-giving power. She is the part of the divine that experiences its own nature as joy. Without Radha, Krishna exists but does not experience himself. Without Krishna, Radha loves but has no object for that love. Together, they represent the completeness of divine experience, the existence of love and its object, the giver of joy, and the one who receives it and returns it and multiplies it into infinity. The love of Radha for Krishna became, in Hindu history, the model for bhakti, devotional love as a spiritual path. The premise of bhakti is radical in its simplicity, that love itself, when directed at the divine, is sufficient for liberation. You do not need elaborate rituals. You do not need mastery of complex philosophy. You do not need years of austere meditation. You need only to love the way Radha loved, completely, without reservation, without calculation, without any agenda except the joy of the beloved's presence. This teaching, when it took hold in medieval India, became a revolution. The Bhakti movement, which flourished roughly between the 7th and 17th centuries CE, produced some of the most beautiful poetry, music, and philosophy in Indian history. It was also, by the standards of its time, radically egalitarian. The great Bhakti saints came from every level of society. There were Brahmins like Ramanuja and Madhva, but also lower caste devotees like Namdev, a tailor, and Chokhamela, an untouchable. There was Mirabai, a Rajput princess who abandoned royal life to wander as a devotee of Krishna. There was Andal, a young woman whose devotional poems to Vishnu are still recited daily in South Indian temples. All of them, in their different ways, understood Radha. They understood that the path of love is not a lesser path, that devotion is not an alternative to wisdom but its highest expression, that when you love completely, your love itself becomes a vehicle for truth. Radha, who appears in no Vedic text, who is not mentioned in the Mahabharata, who arrives in Hindu consciousness relatively late compared to figures like Saraswati or Lakshmi, Radha has become, across the centuries, one of the most beloved figures in all of Hinduism. Her story has inspired painters, poets, dancers, and musicians across 1,000 years. The image of Radha and Krishna together, Radha Krishna, always her name first, is the most universally recognized symbol of divine love in the Hindu world. She did not have cosmic power. She did not win battles or restore cosmic order. She simply loved, completely and without condition. And the universe remembered. Now we must enter a darkness of a different kind. Not the cosmic darkness of Kali, not the darkness of grief, but the darkness of injustice, the specific burning darkness that descends when the world looks at suffering and looks away. This is the darkness of the court of Hastinapura, and the woman standing in it, alone, is Draupadi. She is the daughter of fire. Literally, in the mythological telling, she was born from a sacrificial fire that her father, King Drupada, had conducted with the specific purpose of producing children who could avenge him against the teacher Drona. She emerges from the sacred fire, fully grown, radiantly beautiful, destined for extraordinary things. Her name at birth is Krishna, the Dark One, feminine form of Krishna's name, indicating perhaps that her story and Krishna's story are linked in ways that will only become clear over time. Her Swayamvara, the ceremony at which she chooses her husband, is one of the most famous scenes in the Mahabharata. The challenge was extraordinary. To string a massive bow and use it to hit a rotating fish target while looking only at its reflection in water. Princes from across the known world failed. Arjuna, in disguise among a group of Brahmins, succeeded. And Draupadi was married to all 5 Pandava brothers through a series of circumstances involving their mother Kunti's inadvertent command that whatever they brought home must be shared equally. 5 husbands, each extraordinary, each a source of both love and complication. She is the center around which the entire Pandava household organizes itself. When the Pandavas lose everything in a rigged game of dice to their Kaurava cousins, their kingdom, their wealth, their freedom, and finally, Draupadi herself, what follows is one of the defining moments in Hindu mythology. Draupadi is dragged into the royal court by her hair. She is in a single garment, having just emerged from bathing. She stands before the entire assembly. The blind king, Dhritarashtra, the patriarch Bhishma, the elders, the kings, the warriors. And she is publicly humiliated, with the intent to strip her bare. The man who has ordered this, Dushasana, begins to pull at her garment, and something remarkable happens in this moment that defines both the story and the goddess. Draupadi calls out to Krishna, not to her 5 husbands, who sit with their heads bowed, not to the elders, who cannot seem to move themselves to act, not to the kings who are complicit in their silence. She calls to Krishna, and Krishna responds, not visibly, not in bodily form, but through a miracle that Hindu theology points to again and again. Her garment cannot be removed. Every length of cloth that Dushasana pulls free is replaced by another. He pulls and pulls until he is exhausted, and Draupadi's modesty is intact. But the story does not end there. Because Draupadi, unlike many who receive miraculous rescue, does not simply accept her survival with gratitude and move on. She asks a question. She asks it in front of everyone. She asks it to the entire assembly, to every king, every elder, every self-professed upholder of Dharma who sat and watched or actively participated in her humiliation. She asks, was I legitimately staked in that game? Can a man whose freedom was already lost stake another person? If the Pandavas had already lost themselves, did they have the right to stake me? It is a legal question, a philosophical question, a question about the nature of Dharma, about the rights of persons, about the limits of what men can do with women in the name of social convention. Nobody answers her. Not the great Bhishma, who has answers for everything else, not the lawyers, not the philosophers, not the kings. The silence in that court is the silence of a civilization confronting an uncomfortable truth about itself. Draupadi's question echoes through the rest of the Mahabharata like a wound that will not heal. It drives the war, the Kurukshetra war, 18 days of battle that kills millions, that destroys the old world and ushers in the Kali Yuga, the final age, is traced directly back to this moment, the humiliation of Draupadi, the question nobody answered. Her story became, in Hindu history, one of the foundational texts for thinking about Dharma, justice, and the rights of women. Theologians and philosophers across centuries have wrestled with the question she raised. Courts of justice in ancient India are said to have kept her story in mind as a standard against which their own actions could be measured. And there is something more to say about Draupadi that the stories contain but require careful attention to see. She's not merely a victim. She's not merely a symbol of injustice. She's a person of extraordinary intelligence, extraordinary dignity, and extraordinary spiritual courage. Throughout the Pandavas' 13 years of exile, 12 years in the forest and 1 year in hiding, she is the one who keeps their purpose clear. She is the one who does not let them forget what was done to them, not out of vengeance but out of clarity about Dharma. She is the one who, when Yudhishthira's philosophical acceptance of their situation risks becoming passive resignation, reminds him that Dharma requires action as well as acceptance. She is, in many regional Hindu traditions, worshipped as a goddess in her own right. In Tamil Nadu and other parts of South India, Draupadi Amman temples exist where she is revered as a fierce, protective deity, a goddess of courage and justice, a protector of those who have been wronged and had no recourse. Her story asks, across the centuries, the question that justice always asks: when you see this, what do you do? We began this story with the cosmos, with Adi Shakti breathing existence into being, with the vast primordial force that underlies all that is. And through the lives of these extraordinary beings, we have moved through wisdom and grace, through war and devotion, through love and justice. Now we come to water, to Ganga. She is the holiest river in the world to approximately 1 billion people. She flows from the Gangotri Glacier in the Himalayas, across the northern plains of India, and into the Bay of Bengal, a journey of over 2,500 kilometers. More than 400 million people live in her watershed. More prayers have been offered at her banks. More ashes of the departed have been immersed in her waters. More sacred festivals have been celebrated along her shores than perhaps anywhere else on earth. She is worshipped not simply as a river, but as a goddess, and her story of descent to earth is one of the most beautiful in all of Hindu mythology. Before Ganga came to earth, she flowed only in the heavens. The celestial Ganga was described as so pure, so powerful, so full of divine grace that she was essentially a concentrated form of liberation. To touch her was to be freed from all karma, to be purified of all accumulated sin, to be set on the immediate path to moksha. But she was beyond human reach. A king named Bhagiratha, whose name literally means the one who did the impossible, wanted to bring her down. The reason was this. His ancestors, 60,000 princes of the Sagara dynasty, had been burned to ash by the fire of the sage Kapila's wrath. Their souls were wandering, unable to move on, unable to find rest. According to the tradition, the only thing that could liberate them was the touch of the Ganga. Bhagiratha performed austerities of extraordinary intensity and duration. He stood on one leg for thousands of years, subsisting only on air, meditating with such concentrated purpose that even the gods were moved. Finally, Brahma appeared and told him that, yes, he would ask Ganga to descend. But there was a problem. Ganga's celestial current was so powerful, so overwhelming, that if she fell directly from the heavens to the earth, the impact would be catastrophic. The earth could not contain her. She would flood everything, fracture the ground, destroy the very civilization that Bhagiratha was trying to help. There was only one being whose power was sufficient to receive her, only one who could contain the divine flood without being overwhelmed by it, only one whose presence was so absolute that even the Ganga's force would be held within it. Shiva agreed to receive her. He stood in the Himalayas, the same mountains where he had meditated since Sati's death, where Parvati had performed her tapas, where the highest peaks pierced the boundary between earth and sky, and he tilted his head back. Ganga descended. She fell into the ocean of Shiva's matted hair, the jata, that wild mass of dreadlocked locks that the iconography always shows, piled high on Shiva's head. And in those infinite tangles, she wandered, flowed through, found 1,000 paths, was slowed, was held, was filtered through the divine consciousness of the one who contains everything without being defined by anything. After a long time, after years, the texts say, she found her way out and descended to earth in 7 streams, gentle enough for the earth to receive, pure enough to carry liberation in her touch. Bhagiratha led her southward to the sea, and where her waters touched the ash of his ancestors, they were liberated. Ganga, in Hindu worship, carries this meaning to this day. Her water is collected in copper vessels and kept in homes because it is believed to remain pure for extraordinarily long periods, a belief that modern microbiological research has actually found some support for, identifying bacteriophages in the river that give it unusual, purifying properties. What the Hindu world has always understood about the Ganga is something more intimate than water chemistry. She is grace made available. She is the divine force that, because of one person's impossible dedication, came close enough to touch. She is the answer to the human longing for purification, not the punishing purification of self-condemnation, but the gentle, absolute purification that comes when something so much larger than your errors touches you and washes them away. This is why hundreds of thousands of people enter her waters at dawn, why the dying are carried to her banks, why the ashes of the dead are immersed in her flow. Not because of superstition, but because of a profound understanding carried across thousands of years that there are forces in this universe whose nature is to cleanse, to liberate, to make new. Ganga is one of those forces, and she came to Earth because one person believed the impossible was worth attempting. We have traveled far, from the darkness before creation, to the mountains and rivers and courts and battlefields of a civilization's longest memory. We have met 10 goddesses, or perhaps we have met 10 faces of one goddess. 10 expressions of one inexhaustible reality. Hinduism, at its best, has always known this. That is why the oldest civilization still living on Earth placed women at the center of the divine. Not as a social statement, not as a political position, as the deepest truth they could find.